A while ago, Elon Musk was talking about Fallout 3 on Twitter, or X. Someone responded by saying, War never changes. And Elon Musk replied by saying, they do say that frequently in the game, but actually, war changes a lot. Now, maybe he's joking here. There were plenty of people who replied to this thread saying that he missed the point of the games. But what was surprising to me was the number of people who agreed with him. If he was joking, well, there are a whole lot of people in this thread who weren't. And so I'll risk explaining the obvious. War was waged with sticks and stones, now it's waged with bombs and drones. Of course, warfare changes. But war never changes. And the point of the Fallout games is to demonstrate how war never changes, even though technology does. We have nukes in our universe, but we don't have cryogenic freezing. We don't have ghouls. We don't have the forced evolutionary virus. We don't have plasma weaponry. But none of that matters because war never changes. The very first time that phrase is used is in the introductory sequence to Fallout 1. Ron Perlman narrates the famous line, but pay attention to the script.
War never changes. The Romans waged war to gather slaves and wealth. Spain built an empire from its lust for gold and territory. Hitler shaped a battered Germany into an economic superpower. But war never changes.
The narrator goes on to talk about real atrocities that happened during real wars in our universe and compares them to fictional atrocities that happened during fictional wars in the Fallout universe. This introductory sequence is showing us that the effects of war are the same regardless of the time that war is waged in or the technology used to wage that war. All wars involve extreme human suffering. The Fallout franchise mocks the concept of mutually assured destruction, an idea during the Cold War where some thought that they could ensure peace by ensuring that if they were ever attacked with nukes, their enemy would be destroyed as well. The fact that both sides were armed with civilization-ending weapons ensured peace. Ensured that neither side would ever use them. The Fallout franchise explores a universe where that entire philosophy falls apart because both sides did. And in reality, that almost happened to us several times during the Cold War. But in addition to mocking that idea, the Fallout franchise demonstrates in every single game how war leads to extreme human suffering, which is why the phrase appears in every game and also the Fallout show.
War never changes. War never changes. War never changes. War never changes. War never changes.
War never changes.
War never changes.
War never changes.
During World War II, Alan Turing played a crucial role in cracking German ciphers. The intelligence that the Allies gleaned from his and others' efforts on this project helped them win the war. But after the war, Turing was prosecuted for being a homosexual. He was given a choice: prison or chemical castration. He chose castration and ultimately took his own life using cyanide poison 2 years later. He was betrayed by the nation he served. In 2161, the Vault Dweller helped destroy the Master and the Master's army. He even found a replacement water chip to fix the broken one in Vault 13, saving his people. But when he returned a hero to Vault 13, the Overseer was afraid that his newfound fame would inspire other Vault Dwellers to leave the Vault. He didn't want that, and so he exiled the Vault Dweller to the Wasteland.
You saved us, but you'll kill us. I'm sorry. You're a hero, and you have to leave.
He was betrayed by the very people he saved. In 1942, the Nazis rounded up Jews and political prisoners and interred them in the Ravensbrück concentration camp. There, German scientists experimented on them in a variety of ways, including transplanting bones from one person to another. They didn't use anesthesia. These people were tormented, and many of them died. In 2241, the Enclave invaded Vault 13, kidnapped some of the vault dwellers, and murdered the rest. They interred these residents in cells at Control Station Enclave, the Enclave oil rig. There, they experimented on these captives with trial antidotes for the variation of the forced evolutionary virus that they were planning to release into the Earth's atmosphere. They were tormented by their captors, and many of them died.
They have killed most of us with something they call FEV. They will kill us all before they are through.
In 1965, during the Vietnam War, Private Robert Garwood went driving in his Jeep in South Vietnam, but disappeared. Turns out he got captured by the Viet Cong. He spent several years as a prisoner of war in Viet Cong prison camps. However, when he finally came home, many of his fellow prisoners of war accused him of collaborating with the enemy while he was a captive, going so far as to wear a Vietnamese uniform, wielding Soviet-made weapons, and interrogating other prisoners. The United States investigated these accusations and in 1981 found Private Garwood guilty. Some say that he was brainwashed in captivity by the Viet Cong, which led to him betraying his country. In 2197, General Barnaky led a detachment of the Brotherhood of Steel in a fight against the supermutants holed up in St. Louis. However, he was captured by their leader, Tokamata.
Pull back! Pull back! Reinforcements will be here soon! The super mutants have captured General Barnaky, but we cannot afford to lose your squad attempting a foolish rescue.
While in captivity, the Calculator and his robot army attacked the super mutants and kidnapped General Barnaky. They then brainwashed him and turned him into a cyborg. From then on, Cyborg Barnaky fought for the Calculator against the Brotherhood of Steel, betraying the very people he once served.
The Calculator was logical to enlist me into its service.
Between 1921 and 1922, there was an intense famine in the Volga region of Russia. The famine was caused by economic effects after World War I, political and societal effects from the Russian Revolution and the Russian Civil War, and it was caused by Soviet communism, in particular the grain requisitioning that went on at the time. According to historian Orlando Figes, cannibalism at this time was brutal and widespread. Over 5 million people died during this famine, and those who survived overtly ate human flesh or bought unknown meat from nearby meat marketplaces. But this unknown meat came from children. It was dangerous for children to go out after dark, because there were gangs of men who roamed the streets, hunting down children, murdering them, and selling their flesh to vendors in town. They would tell these vendors that the meat was horse meat or beef, and the vendors didn't care. They were just happy to have meat, and they knew not to ask too many questions. While 5 million people died during the famine, those who survived did the unthinkable. In 2277, the lone wanderer stumbles upon a charming little town called Andale. Unlike other people in the wasteland who wear rags and are always starving, the families that live in Andale appear to be plump and healthy. The lone wanderer discovers later that this is because the family murders and eats anyone who passes by.
After the war, 4 families survived. They continued on just like we have. But when their shelters ran out of food, they need to eat something. You leave here and start warning people about the crazies in Andale, and then food gets a lot more scarce, doesn't it? No, friend. I'm afraid that we can't let you leave. Get the ketchup, Linda.
There are over 80 pieces of quote-unquote strange meat that the lone wanderer can find in Andale. While many people in the wasteland starved all around this family, they survived and thrived by doing the unthinkable. Out of all the Fallout games, I think Fallout New Vegas has some of the most poignant and clear examples of how war never changes. This is due to the sophisticated nations, armies, and politics that had developed on the West Coast by the time of the events of Fallout New Vegas. Here we see a landscape of war that is very familiar to our own. We find a graveyard for NCR soldiers at Camp Forlorn Hope, a battlefield nearby where the corpses of NCR soldiers and legionaries lie side by side in death. The camp is strewn with letters written by NCR soldiers to their friends, family, and loved ones, letters they were never able to send because they died in battle. There's a memorial at Boulder City, etched with the names of NCR troopers who died during the first Battle of Hoover Dam. The game even tackles themes of sexual violence, which has occurred in practically every real war. This is addressed in the story of NCR 1st Recon Sniper Corporal Betsy, who survived her assault by the raider Cook. And Caesar pulls directly from the history books, reinventing many of war's greatest atrocities from the past. He describes in detail the ritual of decamatio.
It means decimation. But in ancient Rome, the word had a very specific meaning. A punishment for cowardice. The legionaries are lined up in ranks. Every 10th man steps forward and is beaten to death by his brothers. It instills a certain robust obedience.
And this was done by the Romans in the real world. It was used by the Romans in 471 BC when they had difficulty conquering their enemy, the Volsci. It was used again in 71 BC by Marcus Licinius Crassus during his war against Spartacus. Caesar's policy of showing the wasteland what total war looked like is pulled right out of Genghis Khan's playbook.
I led the Blackfoot against the Ridgers, their weakest enemy. When they refused to surrender, I ordered every man, woman, and child killed. When next we surrounded the Kaibabs, and they likewise refused, I took one of their envoys to the Ridgers village and showed him the corpse piles. This was new for the tribes, you see. They played at war, raiding each other, a little rape and pillage here, a little ransoming there. I showed them total warfare. Like I said, there's a lot you can learn from old books.
Genghis Khan is infamous for being brutal, even to the point of murdering entire towns that surrendered to him. But when building his army, he did indeed absorb tribes that he conquered, including the Turks, who were instrumental to his success. On March 16, 1968, American soldiers massacred unarmed civilians from 2 hamlets in South Vietnam. The night before the massacre, the soldiers were told that any innocent civilians would have left by the time the soldiers arrived, so they were to consider anyone who remained in town when they got there to be the enemy. That day, American soldiers killed hundreds of unarmed men, women, and children, and sexually assaulted at least 20 of them, an event that we now know as the My Lai Massacre. In 2278, the NCR was trying to root out the Great Khan's raider gang from the Mojave. They followed the trail of the Great Khans, which led to a place called Bitter Springs. The soldiers were told that this was a staging base for Great Khan raider attacks, and to shoot anyone they saw on sight. But it turns out Bitter Springs wasn't a staging base. It was a village filled with the elderly, the women, and the children of the Great Khans. As the villagers tried to flee Bitter Springs, the NCR massacred everyone in the town. Some soldiers, like Craig Boone, were tormented by what they had done, and they held on to this shame and regret for the rest of their lives.
Life has a way of punishing you for the mistakes you make. Big enough mistake, punishment can take a while. Mine's not over. A murderer who does good deeds is still a murderer, and he'll still get his judgment. I left the NCR when my tour was up. Had enough of war. and decided I was going to start over. None of it made a difference in the end.
In 416 BC, Athens was at war with Sparta during the Peloponnesian War. Even though the people of the island of Melos were officially neutral in the war, the Melians had ancestral ties to Sparta, and so Athens arrived at Melos demanding their surrender and demanding that the Melians pay Athens tribute. The Melians refused and asked the Athenians how they could possibly justify this. And in the words of the historian Thucydides, the Athenians responded by saying, "The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must." Athens besieged the city, defeated the Melians, killed all the men of fighting age, and sold the women and children into slavery. In 2287, there was a town called Quincy that was remarkably prosperous for a post-apocalyptic wasteland town. It was so prosperous that a number of villagers lived there. It had a thriving marketplace, and traders from all over the Commonwealth went to Quincy for trade. But this wealth caught the eye of the mercenary faction called the Gunners. Mama Murphy had a vision that the Gunners were about to attack, and the town called for the Minutemen to defend them. After a small victory against a Gunner scouting party, Colonel Hollis of the Minutemen met at the town gates with representatives from the Gunners. The Gunners demanded that the people of Quincy stand down, but the Minutemen refused. The Gunners attacked Quincy that night. They massacred all settlers they could find, and the Minutemen died to the man, with the exception of Preston Garvey, who guided a few survivors safely out of Quincy.
We gave the Gunners a hell of a fight, but we never really stood a chance. There were just too many of them and too few of us.
These survivors included June and his wife Marcy Long. However, their young son Kyle was killed during the Gunner attack, and they barely had time to bury him in a shallow grave before fleeing the town. The strong did what they wanted, and the weak suffered.
Oh God, why? It's not fair. It's not fair. I'm so sorry.
In August of 1941, the Soviets blew up the Dnieper Dam in Ukraine to stop the Nazi German advance. But in so doing, they killed thousands of their own people and their own troops. On December 24th, 2082, Rosalind Jeffries, a member of the Cutthroats Raider Gang, attacked the responders in Charleston, leaving 7 people dead. Even though some of the raiders escaped, Rosalind Jeffries was captured. The responders imprisoned her and interrogated her. The fleeing raiders, however, made it back to the Cutthroats camp. When they informed her boyfriend, David Thorpe, that Rosalind had been apprehended, Thorpe assumed that the responders had killed her. As an act of revenge, he stuffed the Summersville Dam with a bunch of stolen mini-nukes and blew up the dam on Christmas morning. The Summersville Lake flooded the ruins of Charleston, killing hundreds.
What was that? You got something to say, you spit it out.
I just don't see why we gotta go running through all that muck.
Now you listen to me before I smack both eyes into one. My husband is somewhere down in that muck. So's your father, and her gran, and their sisters. We spent weeks crawling through that muck, pulling people out. Thousands of people died in the Christmas flood. More still were never found, drowned, or buried alive. We pulled people out of there for a full year, so you show some respect.
On December 13th, 1937, the Imperial Japanese Army defeated the Chinese National Revolutionary Army at the Battle of Nanking. After the battle, Japanese soldiers rampaged through the town of Nanjing, sexually assaulting and murdering innocent civilians for weeks. The Japanese expected an easy victory at Nanking, but instead they fought hard for months and took far more casualties than they expected. They were frustrated, they saw themselves as superior, and so they indulged themselves, taking what they wanted. To this day, scholars still debate exactly how many people were murdered during the massacre. Conservative estimates are around 40,000. The highest estimates are in excess of 300,000. Most scholars believe it's somewhere just below 200,000 people. And in 2277, or 2281, depending on what you believe, Hank McLean discovered that the people of Shady Sands existed. And since their existence was an affront to his philosophy, he destroyed the town with a nuclear detonation, possibly killing over 30,000 people.
I did what was necessary to save our people. And I believe, Lucy, I know I made the right choice.
Of course, warfare changes. As societies change, as technologies change. But the point of the Fallout franchise, the point of the phrase, war never changes, is to demonstrate that the effects of war, the motives of war, are the same throughout time. War never changes because humans never change. People do. Individual people can change, and Ulysses explains how.
It's said, war never changes. Men do, through the roads they walk. If war doesn't change, men must change.
The roads we walk. Individual life experiences can change individual people, but humanity as a whole never changes. As long as there are humans, as long as there are civilizations, there will be war. And no matter what technology is used to wage that war, no matter what weapons are used, war leads to extensive human suffering. All participants in all wars have their own justifications. There's no such thing as a good war, but sometimes there is a necessary war. Sometimes war is unavoidable. Sometimes people and nations have to defend themselves from aggressors, to engage in a war that is not of their own creation. But none of that changes the ultimate result of war.
I don't know what it was. I don't hold with plague and sleeping sickness and famine and cancer, but they happen all the same. But war's preventable.
Sometimes wars are perpetuated by truly evil people doing truly evil things for no redeeming reason whatsoever. But oftentimes, wars are perpetuated by good people doing evil things for the best of reasons. War never changes because humans never change. The humans before the apocalypse of 2077 are the same as the humans after the apocalypse of 2077. And that is the point Fallout is trying to make. Thanks for watching.